Death sentence for growing old. In the ancient world, when you became too old to hunt, gather, or work, you did not get to retire. You were killed or abandoned. To early human societies, an elderly person who could no longer produce food was a direct threat to the survival of the group. In times of famine or migration, a failing body meant you became a burden to the limited food supply. Societies across the globe developed cold, calculated laws to systematically eliminate the elderly. Today, we are looking at the direct historical and archaeological evidence of Senicide. Case 1. The Sardonian Cliff Executions, Sardinia. Our first piece of proof comes from ancient Greek and Roman records, documenting the island of Sardinia. Historians like Timaeus and Pausanias recorded that when a father reached the age of 70, his own son was legally required to execute him. The son would feed his father a lethal dose of a local neurotoxic plant called water dropwort. This specific toxin caused the facial muscles to violently contract into a tight, grimacing spasm. The son would then march his father to the edge of a steep cliff and push him off to his death. Because the toxin forced the dying man's face into a horrific, permanent grin right before impact, classical writers called this a Sardonic laugh. That is the literal origin of the phrase we use today. Case 2. The Arctic ice abandonment, the Inuit. Our next concrete proof comes from the historical and ethnographic records of the Arctic regions. In the extreme freezing tundras, resources frequently dropped to zero during brutal winters. When a family was on the verge of starving to death, the elderly members of the community walked out onto the ice alone. They would sit on a floating ice floe and wait to freeze to death in the dark. This was a calculated sacrifice. If the old stayed alive and ate the food, the children would starve, and the family line would end. Case 3. The Tiber River voting pushes, ancient Rome. A third piece of documented evidence comes from ancient Rome itself. Roman grammarians recorded a specific historical legal proverb, Sexagenarios de ponte. This translates literally to 60-year-olds are to be thrown from the bridge. Historical analysis shows that during early Roman elections, younger citizens would physically push men over 60 off the voting bridges over the Tiber River. It was an aggressive, literal way to prevent the older generation from controlling the resources and laws of the state. Case 4. The Suicide Cliffs of Ättestupa, Scandinavia. Further evidence is found in medieval Scandinavian culture, documented in Icelandic sagas such as the Gotrek saga. The texts describe specific towering cliffs known as Ättestupa. When elderly citizens became too infirm to perform heavy agricultural work or keep up with the village during winters, they traveled to these cliffs. In front of their gathered family members, the elderly individuals would throw themselves off the precipice onto the rocks below. This was done to save the family household from the financial ruin of feeding an unproductive adult. Case 5. The Mountain Abandonment of Ubasute, Ancient Japan. In East Asia, historical folklore and Buddhist texts record a practice known as Ubasute, which translates literally to abandoning an old woman. During seasons of severe crop failure and starvation, the oldest son was tasked with a specific duty. He would place his elderly mother or father on his back, hike up a remote, desolate mountain peak like Mount Ubasute, and leave them there to die of exposure or starvation. Case 6. The Massage Thai Ritual Feasts, Central Asia. Our final case comes from the Greek historian Herodotus, who documented the customs of the Massage Thai, a nomadic tribe in Central Asia. According to his writings, when a man became very old, all his relations gathered together and sacrificed him along with cattle. They boiled the flesh and feasted on it. The Massage Thai considered this the happiest consequence for an old person, whereas if someone died of disease, they were buried and lamented because they did not reach the honor of being sacrificed for the tribe's nourishment. These practices were not driven by hatred. They were driven by pure math. In a world where every single calorie had to be fought for, a person who consumed food but could no longer gather it was an existential danger to the tribe. We like to believe that modern civilization has completely wiped out these brutal instincts. We built nursing homes, healthcare systems, and retirement funds to take care of the old. But the deep, primitive programming that links resource survival to human value is still inside our DNA. Subscribe for more raw historical facts and dark history.